bullet. Atmosphere gases kutsa krak 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 Israeli Turkey Chutuyaz maman Esti hoshmut Falastini intifad Hari Singh Tumri Abdullah Tandi Astim Muftiyan Hind Khab Dunya Hasovu Sasi Fornovu Esti Dohai Prazno Tuhun Apzad Puts me August Padraunanui Tunzi Jamhuriyat Ukrazgo Fash Amriki Vanan London Tivanan UNS Mazbuzne Tuhuz Nazichar Parmani Koru Sahi accession Sheetik election, UN resolution, fraud, to the article, to the agreement. Nabrutsu temiz, nabrutsu, I say as. Tuiteo do hope, chuesi harchir. Suju emsit gaisi koshuna, kam, panyo balzonish. Tohin sen rayu, estilyok çikenmez inkalab. Durab dokunui, garishni khabri. Zamini esmi soynuti tulani azab aşıktı maşuk. Kaybuk da joda, heraları dilim maşuk istirab. Asfatu pota, ve onu tada. PSAN kurta lecture kar bar makan sanjaliu घर गुजरायु तो ते बागन छुटकारा एहतजाज वक्त चुगावा तहरीक नौका तेजिस मुजादो मुहिम ये पकान ये रवान तेजिस से बांग जुर्को बुझानान Asula kaini shuri marit zanan Yeli azadi Sani kashire Yizyo kabran perte Dizyo aise nad Vanzo shahido Muhim bas manzil Tuhu shahadat bas anjam.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I just want to first say that this song that you were just hearing is Kashmiri Bella Ciao by Zanan Wanan, a Kashmiri feminist collective. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for being here, especially in the midst of an unfolding genocide, intense state surveillance and repression. And each of us is waking up to the rising death toll in Palestine that has surpassed now over 6,000. As the UC Collective for Caste Abolition, we are a collective of students and faculty from across the University of California system pushing for caste abolition in and beyond the UC system. And we're very honored and feel a sense of responsibility, in fact, to organize this teach-in today on Palestine and Kashmir in collaboration with Decolonizing Humanism Initiative at the UCR Center for Ideas and Society. And we thank them for their continued support of our initiatives. Our investment in caste abolition is inseparable from our investment in ending all occupations, which is why we are starting this caste and occupation series today with this teach-in that will hopefully further explore the relationship between caste and occupation. As we will show today in the context of India and its various colonizing projects, such as that of Kashmir, we have to hold both caste and Islamophobia together to understand how India works as a Brahminical settler colonial power in bed with other white settler colonial powers, such as Israel and the United States. The relationship between India and Israel becomes even more clear when we examine the sharing of technologies and strategies used to maintain their occupations. As of 2022, India is the largest purchaser of Israeli-made arms, spending in excess of $1 billion per year. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute also revealed that India's military expenditure in 2021 amounted to $76.6 billion, the third highest in the world after the US and China. The shared commitment to arms co-production, cybersecurity, and surveillance that the two settler states have built has had dire consequences, especially in the 75-year-long Brahminical occupation of Kashmir, as well as from Punjab to Manipur. Activists, journalists, dissidents, students, and unprovoking civilians, who were the only ones who seemed to have retained their humanity in the eyes of this oppressive world, have bore the brunt of this cooperation. Through the use of software like Pegasus and high-end defense equipment such as drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, and missile systems, all tested in Indian-occupied Kashmir, the two settler colonial establishments have shared technologies time and again, dating back to June 1984. 3 decades after the attack on the Sikh Golden Temple, it was revealed that both the UK and Israeli governments had helped the Indian government execute its onslaught through special training by Mossad, an Israeli intelligence organization. Further, India also seeks to model Israel's apartheid structure across its occupied territories and the span of the nation, particularly by targeting Indian Muslims, who make up almost 15% of the population, as well as other religious minorities, including Sikhs and Christians. Outside occupied Kashmir, which has faced the most brutal repression by the current settler regime, the construction of detention camps and policies that seeks to strip religious minorities of their citizenship, for example, through the National Register of Citizens in Assam, is another way in which the Indian state mimics patterns of extermination tested out in Israel during the Nakba. At this time, I'll hand it over to Manmeet to carry us forward with how we are witnessing the deep relationship of India and Israel play out, especially over social media in this moment, to spread disinformation and further the genocidal project. Over to you, Manmeet.
Thank you so much, Anusha, and Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So we wanted to start off a little with mapping out the close relationships as we're really seeing them play out over social media, especially through sharing some examples. So for that, I will, if we could have the slideshow up, please. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay, cool, perfect. Okay, thank you so much. So we just wanted to also provide a content warning, especially as in this PowerPoint, we'll be sharing some of the very inflammatory and really violent social media posts to kind of give y'all some examples of these key linkages between Zionism and Brahmanism as they're playing out in full view, look over social media. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as we're really witnessing kind of both across the Indian media as well as across social media, there has been a huge amount of support outpouring from India for Israel. So if we could play this video really exemplifies a lot of the Zionist support that is emerging out of India and how it's playing out.
The same radical, jihadist, Islamist, terrorist thinking that Israel is a victim of, we are a victim of as well. It's just that we have had a very strong government. Israel is fighting this war on behalf of all of us. Israel is fighting this war for you and me.
और धार्मिक मान्यताओं के साथ हमें इजराइल में बसने की सुविधा दे, क्योंकि जिस बीमारी से वो लड़ रहे हैं, मानवता के जिस कैंसर से वो लड़ रहे हैं, अब पिछले 1400 सालों से उस कैंसर के पीड़ित हैं।
Actually also plays into the sense of Hindu victimhood and villainizing Muslims. So what they're trying to say is that, look, Israel and India, we have a common enemy, and that common enemy are the Muslims. They are the common cultural threat. So by way of extending the solidarity to Israel, it's basically saying that, you know, we are together in fighting this fight against Muslims.
भारत छोड़ो हमास के आतंकवादियों भारत छोड़ो भारत छोड़ो भारत छोड़ो हमास का
So I'd say that it is less pro-Israeli and more anti-Palestinian. It is more anti-Muslim. India has a disinformation problem. It also has an Islamophobia problem. When you mix the two up, this kind of becomes the perfect opportunity to show off your Islamophobia by way of extending support to Israel. But I think the larger fear is how this could potentially enable more anti-Muslim violence and almost give it a certain legitimacy, right? And another excuse. But there is this sense of affiliation, of closeness with Israel. And I really do worry how it could further anti-Muslim hate crimes in the country.
So with really kind of running through this PowerPoint and showing y'all these different examples, we are not saying that all Indians are Zionists or anti-Muslim, but rather we're demonstrating the overwhelming support that state institutions and those in power have for anti-Muslim genocide from Kashmir to Palestine. These include, but is not limited to, the Supreme Court, the police, schools, the Bollywood industry as an arm of the current Hindu right regime in India. And really in contextualizing that since October 7th, one of the trending hashtags was India with stands with Israel or India for Israel. So in really thinking about how that comes to be and this and how we understand and the need to understand this really close and intimate relationship between Zionism and Brahmanism. Next slide, please. Which we have been both preceding October 7th as well as post have been seeing play out through these really violent Islamophobic caricatures of Indian Muslims, particularly that are being represented as viruses, as well as cockroaches as well. So a lot of this genocidal and dehumanizing rhetoric playing out and taking shape in the form of such social media posts, such Twitter posts that have been trending. Next slide, please. And we also kind of wanted to share this particular video. It's that was created by the Israeli arms firm Rafael that is displaying this Bollywood dance number that launched at the 2009 Aero India in Bangalore to kind of exemplify Bollywood's investment and intense support for Israel and the Zionist genocide of Palestinians.
For so long, trusting friends and partners. What more can I pledge to make a future strong?
I need to feel safe and sheltered, security and protection, commitment and perfection.
We don't need to watch the entire video, but just wanted to give y'all an idea of how the violence that we're seeing play out in the form of these social media posts, in the form of these hashtags and the intense support for Israel from India actually has a larger lineage that is being supported by these institutions such as Bollywood and the at large, the entertainment industry. Next slide, please. Which just kind of just further building on that too, we're witnessing these various Bollywood movies coming out, such as Akeli, that is a story of an Indian woman who is running away from ISIS. So just these various very violently Islamophobic movies that Bollywood is putting out that are perpetuating this idea that Muslims are terrorists, and furthering this dehumanizing rhetoric that it has led to this moment where India is on multiple genocide watch lists. And this is a short video of the actress from that movie, in which she is kind of voicing both her relationship to Israel and her gratitude to Israel as well.
Hi everyone, I wanted to take a moment and say thank you to everyone for their messages, for their prayers, for their wishes. I'm back, I'm home, I'm safe, I'm fine. But just 2 days back, I woke up in a hotel room in Tel Aviv with bomb sounds around me and sirens blaring, and we were taken down to a basement and shelter areas. And मैं पहले ऐसे सिचुएशन में कभी रही नहीं हूँ, बट आज जब मैं अपने घर में उठी हूँ with no sounds and feeling safe and feeling fine, तो मुझे रियलाइज़ हो रहा है कि कितनी बड़ी बात है, हम कितने फॉर्चुनेट है कि हम इस कंट्री में हैं, कि हम प्रोटेक्टेड है, हम सेफ है. So I want to take this moment and say thank you to the government of India, say thank you to the Indian embassy, say thank you to the Israel embassy for guiding us, for advising us, and making it possible for me to come back home to my country safe and sound. I also want to take a moment and extend my prayers and wishes to the people still stuck in the war. And I really hope for peace very soon.
Next slide, please. This was just kind of contextualizing the story of this Bollywood movie, which is just one of the various movies that we're seeing that are coming out that are furthering such Islamophobic rhetoric. Across India as well, we are witnessing pro-Palestinian protests that are also being intensely surveilled, where folks are being arrested. The state has been cracking down on a lot of the pro-Palestinian rhetoric as well. So this is just a quick video kind of exemplifying a protest outside of the Israeli embassy in India in support of Palestine that the police mobilized against and were arresting folks from.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
We were here to protest in front of the Embassy of Israel and against the genocide that they are conducting. We are being detained.
यहाँ पर कैसे शांतिपूर्वक प्रदर्शन के लिए आए थे?
But even in the midst of such intense state repression, folks have been continuing to show up and continuing to protest, all while facing the Indian state's crackdown on those protests. Next slide, please.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
And on the flip side, we're also seeing pro-Israeli protests that have been happening, such as that this video will show, where folks are actually protesting for the right to join the Israeli army in order to actually participate in violence against Muslims, violence against Palestinians, which is fueled a lot by the intense Islamophobia that we're witnessing, that is a shared thread. So if we could play this video, this is a video of protests that were happening outside the Israeli embassy in India in support of Israel and fighting for the right to participate in Israeli military.
सभी क्या आप सभी इजराइल जाना चाहते हो? हाँ। आपको कितने लोग चाहिए, कितने लाख लोग चाहिए? पहले आप ये बताओ कि आपको 10 लाख लोग चाहिए या 1 करोड़ लोग चाहिए? हम बैठे हुए तैयार. हर घर से मेरे जैसे निकलेंगे, वो अफजल नहीं निकाल पाएंगे, लेकिन मैं मेरे जैसे हजारों में नहीं लाखों में खड़े कर दूंगा मेरे जैसे. बस आप एक बार इशारा कर देना, हमारे लिए अपने दरवाजे खोल देना. हम जिस समय कहोगे उस समय आपके वहां आने के लिए तैयार हैं. बस एक मौका दे देना हमको. हम ईंट से ईंट बजा देंगे, पर इजराइल की आन बान शान को नीचे नहीं आने देंगे. जो व्यक्ति भारत माता की जय बोलने में हिचकता है, ना जय नहीं लेता है, तो वो देशद्रोही है. मेरे हाथ में AK-47 दो और सामने खड़ा कर देना कि तू अल्लाह के अलावा सिर मत झुकाना, और वो 2 मिनट मेरे पैरों में पड़ जाएगा. फिर क्यों पड़ जाएगा वो?
Next slide, please. And alongside the protests happening like on the ground, we're also seeing across social media, where social media is also becoming this field where a lot of Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian and Zionist propaganda is being furthered, such as these different ads that were being created by troll accounts that were mocking Palestinian children. Next slide, please. This advocacy for the implementation of the Israel model to further the Hindu nationalist project. So we're really kind of seeing a lot of Hindu nationalists on the ground take strategies and advocate for looking to Israel as well in order to think about how do we, as a model for the strategies need to be implemented on the ground to further genocide. Next slide, please. And kind of speaking a little further about what I mentioned about social media and at large kind of media becoming like a battleground, where this is really important in the context that the BJP and the IT cell are very coordinated and have been using a lot of the disinformation that IDF and Israel has been putting out, disinformation that with time even that has been dispelled, that the Indian BJP IT cells actually continue reifying further and building on to further spread the propaganda, all which again is based on the disinformation. So this is just a quick video of the violence of very the type of journalism that has been coming out that has been based in disinformation that in order to create the public consent for genocide.
Countries, and on top of that they move to Western countries with their religion and impose their values into the fabric of the societies that welcome them. And on top of that, they don't want Jews to have one single country. Let's get this straight. Christians have 21 countries where the state religion is Christianity. Muslims have 55 countries. And Jews are not allowed to have one goddamn country. The most irrational thing of it all, well, it's not really irrational if you understand Islamic theology, but
so as with this PowerPoint, we could stop sharing screen as well. We really kind of wanted to map out the deep relationship that as we're seeing spell out between India and Israel in creating these various conditions and creating and supporting these conditions that are allowing for and further encouraging genocide, whether both from Palestine as well as like across India as well. And across the various colonies that India is occupying and maintaining. So with that said, today will be thinking more closely about the relationship between Palestine and Kashmir, for which we have the honor of Professor Huma Dar joining us. So I will read the introduction to and the bio of Professor Dar, and then especially as we're kind of sitting with the enormity of this violence and struggling to grapple with it, many of us have been turning to our faiths. So we, in introducing Professor Dar, we wanted to hold a space for prayer as we kind of think about building our capacity to keeping in relation with each other and keep fighting together. So with that, after introducing Professor Dar, I would lead an ardas and then pass it over to Professor Dar to start with the dua and going into the lecture that she has prepared. So in starting off with Professor Dar's introduction, Professor Huma Dar's paternal family was ethnically cleansed from Srinagar, Kashmir in 1948 for demanding plebiscites under the UN resolutions. Her maternal family, exiled from Kashmir after accepting Islam during the Dogra regime, fought for independence from the British. With an interdisciplinary background in South Asian studies, Professor Dar has lectured in the departments of Women's and Gender Studies, Ethnic Studies, and South Asian Studies at the University of California at Berkeley, and in the Department of Critical Studies and Philosophy at the California College of the Arts, amongst others. Professor Dar's work is focused on the intersections and co-formations of race, religion, class, caste, gender, sexuality, and the national politics of South Asia and the South Asian diasporas. centered on intellectual and political activism for social justice, especially in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Her published works include cinematic strategies for a pornographic Kashmir and some counter archives in the Journal of Contemporary Theory of niqabs, monsters, and decolonial feminisms. Can a Muslim be an Indian and not a traitor or a terrorist? In shared idioms, sacred symbols and the articulation of identities in South Asia, and a rescue project initiated by the oppressors, why the exercise of casteist privilege can never annihilate caste, or what's wrong with the Navayana project on AOC, in Hatred in the Belly, Politics Behind Appropriation of Dr. Ambedkar's Writings, and pieces published in several edited volumes focused on South Asia. Professor Dar is a feature writer at Pulse Media, a collaborative political activist and academic weblog, and is a published poet. She is a founding member of the UC Berkeley Center for Race and Gender and Townsend Center Working Group on Muslim Identities and Cultures, and organized the feminist conference Boundaries in Question on the theme of women and war, both at UC Berkeley. Professor Dar is also a feature writer at Pulse Media, and we, with a lot of these writings that we have named, for folks who are in attendance, we can also share those via email as well. So with that, I can start off with an ardas and then pass it over to Professor Dar. Ardas, ek onkar Shri Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh, Shri Bhagoti Ji Sahay, Var Shri Bhagoti Ji ki Paat Sahi Dasmi. Pritam Bhagoti Simar Kya Guru Nanak Laite Aaye, Fir Angad Gurte Amardas, Ramdase Hoy Sahay, Arjan Har Govindano, Simaro Sri Harai, Sri Krishna Te Aaye, Jiste Te Sabd Pajaye, Teg Bahadur Simariye, Karunon Diave Thai, Sabathai Hoy Sahay, Dasa Patsha, Shri Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji, Sabathai Hoy Sahay, Dasa Patsha Di Jot, Shri Guru Granth Sahib Ji De Paठ Di Dada Te Antar Ke, Bolo Ji, Vaheguru, He Nimania de Man, Nitania de Tan, Neote Diot, Sache Mata Pita Meet Hamare Vaheguru Sahib Jio. Priya Zurivich, today we are assembled here in solidarity, in exhaustion, in hopes, in aspirations. And as we launch the Caste and Occupation series today, Vaheguru, like, please bless us and please keep holding us, keep guiding us through this moment, keep holding our exhaustion, and continuously orienting us towards freedom, continuously orienting us towards fighting and resisting and winning against all these occupations from Palestine to Kashmir, all these visions of ending all prisons and carceral projects, all settler colonial projects, freeing all political prisoners, and realizing these various visions that you have passed on to us, whether they be of Begumpura, Halimi Raj, Khalsa Raj. Please bless us and please sustain us in continuously fighting until our victory. Please help guide us towards the way of the shaheeds, of the martyrs, thousands of which whose martyrdom is guiding this movement as well. Akhar vada kata pul chuk maaf karani, sarbat de karaj ras karne, sei pyare mel jin milya aap jida naam chite aave, nanak naam chaddi kala, tere pane sarbat da pala, Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh. And with that, I want to welcome and pass it over to Professor Dar to take us, start us with the dua and moving over to the teach-in lecture.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Infinitely Merciful. I want to start with a prayer which actually echoes Vaheguru Ji Di Fateh. The word Fateh is from Arabic. The first opening chapter of the Quran is called Surah Fatiha, and I'll begin with that. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal lazina anamta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. It is the opening of the Quran. The word Fateh means the opening. It also means the victory. Within the word opening is the victory. Within the opening of hearts, within the opening of sieges on our spirits, on our souls, on our bodies, on our lands, on our cultures, on our spiritual traditions, the opening of that is our victory. And like my beautiful colleague, son, friend, relative, Manmeet, and each and every person who is involved in this magnificent effort to stand with the most beautiful, courageous people of Palestine. They are showing us how to fight and how to win. They are showing us the strength of their spirit. And standing here on the Chochenyo Ohlone land, I cannot not mention the fact that I am on a settler colony. So I owe my bread and butter, my fruit and vegetables, the air I breathe, the water I drink, the food with which I raised my 2 children as a single mother, to the Chochenyo Ohlone land. And I thank them deeply. And I stand with them exactly as I stand with my Palestinian relatives and my Kashmiri blood. And with all of you, and wherever there is oppression, wherever there is pain and injustice and tyranny, we have to consider them together. I want to share screen and show you a poem of mine that I wrote in 2016 after the murder of a 22-year-old Kashmiri freedom fighter. His name was Burhan Wani. He had taken up the arms, but he had never hurt anyone. Forget killing, he had not even injured a single human being. And he was killed as an extrajudicial murder by the Indian occupying army on July 9th, 2016. So this poem is मैं बुरहान वानी हूँ. मैं बुरहान हूँ या मैं उसकी माँ हूँ और वो बेटा मेरा है, या मैं उसकी माँ हूँ, सदियों से उदास हूँ, सदियों से उदास हूँ कि जुल्म और सितम रुकता नहीं, गुलामी का ये बोझ है कि कुछ भी हो घटता नहीं, दर्द की कासनी पाजेब है कि बचती रहे, खून का सैलाब है कि आज भी पुरजोर है, थमता नहीं है गम, वो गम जो गुलाम कौमों की मीरास है, जो वादिये लौलाब में बुनी एक चादर है, वो गम जो बुरहान के जवान जनाजे से कई ज्यादा गिरा है वो खून जो उसकी रगों में बहता था, गिरा है वो इश्क जो उसके दिल में धड़कता था, वो लख्ते जिगर हमारा है, उन सब माओं की आंख का तारा है, जो रात भर सोई नहीं है रात भर ये मातमी रात, जो सदियों सहर की मुतलाशी है, मगर ये सहर है कि दाग दाग उजाला है, ये सहर है कि शब गजीदा पाबजौला है। इस सहर को शफाफ कर या रब, इस सहर को पुरनूर कर या रब, इस सहर को आजाद कर या रब, और हाँ, मेरा खून मुझे वापस कर दे, मेरे बच्चे मुझे लौटा दे या रब। So you can see this is not a poem that I recite very often for this reason. I'll read, this was in Urdu, and I was citing Faiz Ahmad Faiz intermittently within the poem. I did an English translation of my own poem, and I'm going to read that. I am Burhan, or I am his mother, and he my son. Or I am his aunt, disquiet since centuries. Disquiet since centuries that tyranny and oppression don't stem. The weight of slavery just doesn't decrease. Purple anklets of pain ring and keep ringing. A deluge of blood that still today storms without end. Doesn't end that pain, the pain and inheritance of colonized nations, the pain a shawl woven in the Lolab Valley, that pain heavier still than Burhan's youthful bier. Priceless is the blood that coursed through his body. Priceless is the ishq that pulsed through his heart. He is our flesh and our blood, the darling of all of us mothers who haven't slept all night, hasn't slept all night this mournful night that seeks a dawn since centuries. But this dawn with mottled, stained light, this dawn, night-bitten, fettered feet. O Lord, clear this dawn. O Lord, make this dawn luminous. O Lord, free this dawn. And yes, return my blood to me. Return my children to me, O Lord. And this was about exactly the same time that my Facebook account was permanently disabled. My actually, the poem was written later, but my posting some photographs from the funeral services of this young 22-year-old youth, a beautiful, lovely youth, at whose funeral service, despite all blockage of internet, all communication, 750,000 Kashmiris showed up in the middle of villages. Those photographs were too much for Facebook and for their Hindutva Brahminical apparatchiks that staff the Facebook here in the US and back in India. And I know many of you already know the strong deals between Facebook and the Hindu nationalist, ethno-nationalist, fascist framework that you're talking about. So why are we talking of Kashmir? And when we want to stand together in solidarity, in love, in support with Palestinians. The principle of justice leads us to understand the core of injustice wherever we find oppression. However incommensurable each situation may be, this learning is crucial to comprehend the intersections, co-formations, divergences, and connections across contexts, and above all, the various modalities of power, precisely in a bid to dismantle all oppressions. In my engagement in the decolonization of Kashmir from the genocidal settler colonial Indian regime, the active military, technical, discursive support, and ideological modeling of the Zionist Israeli state for the Brahminical Indian state remains unignorable. In particular, the application of the Israeli model, and it can be very well be argued that India also offers the Indian model to Israel. And the current conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and how that is deployed as a weapon is the context of my talk here. So I will, what exactly is this Brahminical Indian occupation that I've mentioned right here? I did not use the word Hindutva. I did not use Hindu nationalist because the occupation of Kashmir by India started in 1947, 26th October, 1947 to be exact. So almost exactly 76 years ago. And through all the parties that have ever ruled in India, whether it's the so-called secular Congress or even the Communist Party of India that has that has parliamentary representation, or BJP, they all agree on the colonization, the genocidal settler colonization of Kashmir. So I want to, for those of you who might not be fully fluent in Brahmanism, in what exactly is the meaning of Brahmanism? Is Huma being anti-Hindu? I mean, that's a slur that is posted against me all over Twitter, that Huma is Hinduphobic. I would like to start off with that. So okay. Let's see if I can have it. Slideshow. Okay. So this here is a representation of Mother India. Mother India, and I won't say anthropomorphic, but deomorphic, because she's made to look like the Bengali goddess Kali Ma. She's wearing a sari, she is a Brahminical goddess, multiple hands, holding all kinds of weapons, including a lotus flower, which is the sign of, which is actually also the sign of BJP, and swords, as you can see, riding a lion instead of the tiger, which is the carrier animal for Kali Ma. And yet, in many Indic languages, many South Asian languages, the words for tiger and lion are interchangeable. And
sorry, Huma, I apologize for interrupting. We cannot see your slides. It says loading.
Okay.
Maybe if you want to press escape and try again. Thank you.
Let's see. Can you see it now?
We can see this, yeah. We just
Okay, let's stick with this then. Would that be okay? Or I can try it again. Is this visible?
Just the white background. That's it. Not the image. Yeah.
Okay, let's stick to the smaller version then. I'm sitting right here to the modem and the satellite, so it should have worked, but who knows? Maybe some Zionist, white supremacist, Brahminical tech people are, intervening here. But anyway, if you can see this, the figure of Mother India or Bharat Mata. Mata is mother. Bharat is the Brahminical name for India, because there was no such place, single country called India ever until the British India. So until the coloniality of the British, there was no one country ever historically called India. And the figure of this goddess, which is a newfangled goddess invented in the late 19th century, it's imposed on the geographical map of South Asia, if you can notice it. This is the Indian peninsula behind her, where her Bharat Mata's dagger is plunging in. That would be Pakistan. So you can see the intentions of the iconographers very clearly. And Kashmir is where her head would be. And this here, the dark spot here, is actually Bangladesh, surrounded on all sides except for a little border that it shares with Burma or Myanmar. And I have actually imposed on it another slide which says it's an actual photograph from the road between Punjab and Kashmir. And on the road, it says it's by Border Roads Organization. It's a part of the military organization. And it says Kashmir is the crown of India. So those of us who know a little bit about the British colonialism would remember, this is the time to remember that the British used to call India their crown jewel, right? So it is not even funny. It's not even a coincidence that the Indian colonizers picked up the language of the British coloniality, of the British Empire, and imposed it directly onto Kashmir. It's the crown of India. And historically, there is obviously no such reference to Kashmir as the crown of South Asia. And it can be very legitimately be argued, Kashmir being in the crossroads between Central Asia. So there is New Turkmenistan, colonized by China, towards its east. There are Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, etc. onto its west, and Afghanistan also towards its west. So it was always on, it was one of the major pit stops of the Silk Route, and that is why silk actually came to all of South Asia through Kashmir. So it's not even, one can argue that it's not just South Asian, it's on the crossroads between South Asia and Central Asia. But this assumption of crown just reveals their the coloniality. And for the caste system, so why do I say Brahminical coloniality of India? It's because just like Zionism is the guiding methodology, it's the guiding ideology that's behind the genocidal settler colonialism of Israel over Palestine, in very much the same way, Brahminism is the guiding ideology that undergirds the coloniality of India on Kashmir. And actually, we can go back to an even earlier example, white supremacy. White supremacy and the conquest, the settler colonialism, the genocidal settler colonialism on Turtle Island, they co-formed at the same time. In very much the same way, Brahmanism, Zionism, they undergird the coloniality, and the coloniality feeds into the supremacist complex. So according to the caste hierarchy, this is what is usually, I hope it's not too small on your screens, but this is from Equality Lab, an amazing, pioneering, groundbreaking organization that has led the war against the oppression of caste in the United States and elsewhere. And so these some of the figures are from there. So this triangle in the middle, the blue with the pastel triangle, at the very top is the so-called Brahmins, or the priestly class, the scholars caste, and they're supposed to be the fountainhead of Brahminism. And then comes the Kshatriyas, or the Rajputs, the rulers. And the third one are the Vaishyas, or the traders, the merchants. And the fourth is the Shudra, which is also another name for slave. So even though they are within the caste system, they are underneath the line of impurity. So they are an impure caste within the caste hierarchy. And outside these four classes is the caste for Dalits, erstwhile untouchables. And if we look at the figure here of the god Brahma, the Brahminical proposal, their stance, their belief is that the Brahmins emerge from the head, so the intellect, the right to speak, the right to create knowledges, the right to lead comes from Brahmins. The Kshatriyas, the rulers, the ones that hold the scepters and the swords, are the Kshatriyas. The legs, the torso, that are the The traders and the merchants are the Vaishyas, the three pure classes, and the feet, the Shudras, the erstwhile slave class, actually my father's caste before conversion, that's the feet. And outside even the body of Brahma is their argument that Dalits lie even outside the body. So the defining features of caste are religious, social hierarchy by birth, endogamy or marriage within caste, and 3, inheritance of privileges. This inheritance of privileges is crucial. It's critical to understand the pathology of caste. And caste, the word actually comes from Latin, from the Portuguese word casta, and it is cognate with chastity. The actual word that's mentioned in the Brahminical text, including in the Rig Veda, the earliest Brahminical text, is varna, and it is cognate with the English word varnish. So it means color, it stands for color. And the assumption being that the Indo-Europeans who came from Central Asia and conquered South Asia wanted to keep their color pure, their lighter skin purified from the darker indigenous people. Another map to show where exactly to see how the newfangled geomorphic iconography of India as Bharat Mata, or as this goddess. And here's a map of India. The very first temple to this goddess was inaugurated by Gandhi. I refuse to call him Mahatma, and because Mahatma means the great soul, and I do not think he was a great soul. It was inaugurated in 1937, and it is a map in marble, a geomorphic, a map of South Asia. And underlying this, this geomorphic representation of India is also deep Islamophobia and deep anti-monotheism. As a Muslim, I know that I bow to no one else but Allah. And to think of anything else as a god or a goddess is one of the most unforgivable sins in Islam. So to impose this representation of India onto a substantial demography of British India at that time when it was invented was in itself an assertion of Brahmanism. It was in and of itself a power move by the Brahmins who led the Indian National Congress. According to some estimates, at least 96% of the people in Indian National Congress before partition, before the British left, was from the upper 3 castes, and mostly from the Brahmins. Muslims, and especially Pasmanda Muslims, or Muslims from the lower castes, people who had converted from lower castes, was extremely minuscule. Almost 85% of the Muslims in all of South Asia can trace their lineage back to the oppressed castes of either Dalits or the Shudras or OBCs, or called Bahujans. The word Bahujan comes from 2 words, Bahu, which means Bahut or many, and Jan, with people, as in generative. And so the majority of people actually in South Asia are the Bahujans and Dalits. And the recent caste census, which still has not been, let me actually come back to this pyramid again, the privilege of the upper caste. So the way the pyramid is formed, the Brahmins are less than 3% of all of the South Asian population or Indian population. And in this case, that 3% would be just barely a teeny tiny tip. And yet they are so dominant, they're so hegemonic and dominant in India, and in some ways also the Muslim Brahmins, and I'll tell you what the Muslim Brahmins, what I mean by Muslim Brahmins, that they are they they are the people that most Westerners think of when they think of as Indians. When I go to a grocery store and they say, "Oh, Namaste Mataji," and they fold their hands like this, and I'm like, "No, Walaikum Assalam." They're assuming that A, I'm Hindu, B, that I'm an upper caste person. And in the Bollywood, the culture that is shown over and over again is of that less than 3% people. And so even visually, they make themselves occupy greater position so as to not trip off the people about their inordinate, disproportional, actually overwhelmingly disproportionate amount of power that they hold in academia, in the military, in the judiciary, in the legislative assembly, at each and every level within India. It is the upper caste, the Savarna, the so-called three pure castes, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, who overwhelmingly have power in India. Okay, so why is the settler colonialism of India on Kashmir Brahminical? It's because ideologically they justify it as Kashmir as a fountainhead of Brahmanism, which is actually ahistorical. It is unfactual. The very first written text of history from all of South Asia comes from Kashmir. It's a book called Raj Tarangani, meaning the River of Kings. And the book actually mentions the Brahmins as coming from abroad, as coming from outside, that they were actually not Kashmiris. And it is the generosity of Kashmir that we actually, people today consider Brahmins as Kashmiri Brahmins. And during the Mughal time, they asked for a title of Pandits, which means the learned ones. So each and every Kashmiri Brahmin, it was a gift to them from the Mughal colonizers of Kashmir to be called Kashmiri Pandit. And I would actually like to not use that word and actually call them Kashmiri Brahmin, because it reveals their power in the caste hierarchy. And it is a decolonial move that strips a colonial title from a group that kind of almost always played the role of collaborators for the colonialism of Kashmir. So I will now begin and it's the interesting thing is that the kind of punishments that Kashmiri resistant fighters, just even regular Kashmiris, Kashmiri women, Kashmiri girls, all Kashmiris, Kashmiri trans people, the kind of punishments that we are met with when we resist Indian occupation bear the stamp of Brahmanism. So within India, almost every day you can pick up the newspaper from any part of India and you will discover news about either the rape or the killing of a Dalit person, or the upper caste people blackening their faces, parading them naked in the villages or towns or cities, and arsoning their homes, burning their fields. And these precisely are the methods that the Indian occupying army has used in Kashmir: blackening faces of Kashmiris, raping entire villages, naked parades, and the way they have treated us, and they actually call us out as vermin, as beasts, as animals. We had a huge flood in 2014, a sign of the global warming and the climate crisis, and also the depredations of colonialism. And Twitter and Facebook were filled with Indian upper caste trolls praying for the death of each and every Kashmiri Muslim, praying that all of us will be swept away with the floods into the Arabian Sea. So that level of hatred is ongoing and it's continuous. So I want to now read a little bit from my paper and show you some of the slides that kind of go with that. So in my so I argue that the application of the Israeli model, and you've seen from Manmeet and earlier how the Indian Consul General in New York City in 2019, there was a viral video where he explicitly says that, you know, we now have Kashmir and we have abrogated their figment of autonomy and we should apply the Israeli model. So what is this Israeli model? The application of this Israeli model is a vital aspect of the context of Indian settler colonialism in Kashmir post-August 2019. It's a context that kills all speech and aspirations to self-determination. It disappears human beings along with the language to talk about this disappearance. In this presentation, it's a paper in the works. In this paper, I undertake a preliminary historicizing of the shocking disappearance of almost 10,000 or 9,765 to be exact, Kashmiri Muslim girls and women, just in the 2.5 years between 2019 and 2021. Within 3 years of the formal and illegal annexation of Muslim majority, mostly rural Kashmir by India on August 5th, 2019, this was followed by the longest communication blockade, cutting off of all internet, all telephone services, carried out by any allegedly democratic country in the world, leave alone the mother of all democracies, as India has recently been hyperbolically designating itself, and I find that actually deeply nauseating. Internet was restored in the Kashmir Valley to 4G network only after 18 months. Imagine if you and I lost our internet connection for 18 minutes, 18 hours, 18 days. What would that feel like? Although 2G speed from the 90s era, when we had to wait half an hour for a photograph to load on our email, that was started after 7 months, with severe limitations entailing debilitating consequences for the medical and the civilian population during that very first uncertain year of the COVID pandemic. For the following 4 consecutive years, India leads the world in internet shutdowns. About 80% of these are imposed on Kashmiris. While at least 4 million Indians have been given resident status in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where the total population was 13 million in the last reported census of 2011. Strangely enough, the figures from the 2021 for the population in Kashmir have never been announced. They should have been projected to be at least about 15 million, but the state, Indian state, the occupying state, keeps on still mentioning the 2011 figure of 13 million. This ethnic flooding follows the genocide of at least 750,000 Muslims in 1947, a kind of Kashmiri Nakba, a catastrophe that we did not have the language to name. Mostly from the province of Jammu, 250,000 of whom were killed, and 30,000 Muslim women abducted and raped. And I say that as a very, very distant aunt of mine was recovered after 6 years with 3 children from her kidnapper. So what was happening while at least 15 million Kashmiris were gagged in the most militarized occupation in the world? And how do 9,765 Kashmiri women disappear? This is almost 300% higher than the data of 3,300 disappeared girls and women from Kashmir in the previous 3 years, 2016 to 2019. Within 24 hours of the illegal annexation and Kashmir's blockade, social media was abuzz with Indians celebrating their colonial triumph loudly and feverishly. The loudest and most feverish amongst them were Indian men, prematurely celebrating their capture of light-skinned Kashmiri women. Within 5 days, even the BJP chief minister of a North Indian state, Haryana, CM Khattar, joined in the Indian joke about bringing Kashmiri women to Haryana to improve their abysmal sex ratio of an infamously misogynist state. This fascination with Kashmiri Muslim women predates the Indian democratic empire. And of course, I'm putting democratic within quotation marks. In my earlier work on the courtesans of British India at the turn of the 19th century, I kept finding references to how the Tawaifs, or the courtesans from the princely state of Kashmir, were considered the most prized sex workers by North Indians. And remember, North India was actually separate from Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir had a Hindu ruler, a Dogra Hindu ruler, upper caste Hindu ruler, whereas Awadh and Delhi and all were under the British Empire. Recent research indicates that Dogra Brahminical regime from 1846 to 1947, who had purchased Kashmir from the British as a reward for their betrayal of the Punjabi Sikh rulers, drew 15 to 25% of their state revenues from taxes on Kashmiri Muslim sex workers and from sex trafficking. I'd like to pause here a little bit. This is a mind-boggling figure. Imagine if the US made 25% of its revenue from taxes on sex workers and explicit sex trafficking. How did this come about? The Sikh and Dogra colonizers levied exorbitant, life-disabling taxes on Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Muslims alone, and stole land from them, effectively reducing them to penury. During the vicious famine of 1832, the taxes were reduced on Kashmiri Muslims from their usual 80% to 50%, so that the Kashmiri Muslims, the laborers, the workers, the peasants, the people who grew the rice and the vegetables would not die en masse. The Dogra Gulab Singh bought Kashmir from the British Empire and paid an annual sum to them, which the Dogras collected from the taxes extracted from Kashmiri Muslims. In some ways, this is analogous to the white slave owners making huge amounts of profit from slave trade, from the free labor of enslaved peoples, and then using that same money to fund more slave trade. Kashmiri Brahmins were exempt from such extortionist taxes and actually employed as the tax collectors. And for those of you who would like to read more on that, there is Mriddu Rai's text, Hindu rulers, Muslim subjects, as well as Khalid Bashir's excellent history on Kashmir that are available as ebooks and as hard copy and soft copies as well. During the famine of 1877 to 1879, 60% of all Kashmiri Muslims died. This means that people in the audience today, myself, my children, we are one of those rare people in that 40%. Our ancestors were lucky enough that they were in that 40% who survived. And records indicate the pride that not a single non-Muslim died. In such times of wretchedness, when the tax collectors came to collect the usual up to 80% taxes and found the Kashmiri Muslims of oppressed caste backgrounds unable to pay, what did they do? They took away the young sons and the young daughters in lieu of taxes. The males were sucked into the institution of begar or debt slavery, with the average life expectancy of just 3 more years. And the girls and women were forced into sex work within and without the state boundaries. These two interlocking structures were exclusively imposed only on caste-oppressed Kashmiri Muslims, and specifically excluded not just the Kashmiri Brahmins, but also the minuscule minority of dominant caste, i.e. Sayyid Muslims, those who worked as peasants and menial laborers for the Kashmiri Brahmins and the Hindu dominant caste Dogras. This, because they needed labor, they needed their Kashmiri Muslim labor to live. This clear schema of the composition of laboring bodies based on caste, religion, gender, class, under the multiple colonial occupations has continued and reinforced the production of most Kashmiri Muslims as the Dalitized body under the present-day capitalist Brahminical patriarchy of post-colonial India. And I put post-colonial India because I critique the foundations of India being post-colonial, and I agree. I would argue that it is still a colonial society, not just in Kashmir, not just in Assam, Manipur, Nagaland, Mizoram, and all, but actually over all of the territory, because they act as colonizers over the Dalits and the Bahujans. So how do 9,765 Kashmiri Muslim women disappear into thin air in a surveillance state, where each and every social media post, like, comment, retweet, and even each phone call made via internet apps is rigorously monitored by the Brahminical occupation apparatus and punished accordingly? I'd remind you that in Manu Smriti, this law textbook of Brahmanism, and Manu is, there's a statue of Manu outside the Rajasthan high courts. Within his textbook, he writes that the punishment for women and for the oppressed caste, both the Shudras as well as the Dalits, for them to listen to their texts, even the religious texts, the punishment was to pour molten lead into our ears. Obviously, a capital punishment, we would die, but to keep us away from education. There are at least 3 Kashmiri academics in prison right now for a WhatsApp status. And who knew WhatsApp status? People even read WhatsApp status. For liking an FB post, Facebook post, and for a repost. How do Kashmiri Muslim women disappear precisely at a time of extreme surveillance of a racialized, Islamophobic, settler colonial regime that explicitly takes Israel as its model, where they can hear each breath that we take? India is a major purchaser of Israel's cutting-edge facial recognition technology, FRT, and surveillance spyware like Pegasus, imported from India's professed soulmate, Israel. And this word, soulmate, obscene as it is to be used by India and Israel, has been used by Indian army generals, Israeli generals, in media pieces. How do 9,765 Kashmiri Muslim women disappear when each business owner, including the smallest corner store owner in Kashmir, is forced to install CCTVs and equipment to record everything and share it with the occupation authorities by official orders? So it's like the panopticon We pay to surveil on ourselves with spare batteries in times of power loss. And those times of power loss are aplenty, despite Kashmir being a mecca of hydroelectric power, precisely due to the colonial theft of power. And very importantly, why have you not heard about it? What is the political context that makes this disappearance go unremarked? The connection to the missing Indigenous women in Turtle Island in Canada should be clear to us right now. I would also like to argue that the tropes of Kashmiri Muslim terrorist, the discourse of Kashmiri Brahmin genocide, and the conflation of any critique of Brahminical coloniality of India, and not just in Kashmir, with Hindu phobia, are being deployed to silence and deflect any critique of India's ongoing colonial, Brahminical, Islamophobic projects. India is, after all, on genocide watch for multiple ongoing genocides. Kashmiri Muslims are one arena, Indian Muslims are another, people in Manipur yet another. Dalits all over India, yet another register. In a calculated bid to criminalize resistance and fully subjugate the colonized Kashmiri Muslim journalists and human rights defenders, they are regularly labeled as part of a terrorist, separatist intellectual ecosystem and disciplined accordingly. So my dear friends Irfan Miraj and Khurram Parvez have been in prison for more than a year at this point, including the journalists Asif Sultan, Fahad Khan, Mudassir Gul, Sirjan Barkati. There are hundreds and hundreds of truth speakers who are being tortured in Indian prisons. It seems here that the Indian state takes from the deeply Zionist definition of anti-Semitism, the definition that says that if you're an anti-Zionist, then if you critique Israel, you're being anti-Semitic. And this is a significant model on how to preempt any critique of its own genocidal coloniality in Muslim majority Kashmir. Maybe many of you either saw the film or heard about the film or read about the film called The Kashmir Files that was released last year, 2022, by a disgusting, obscene filmmaker called Vivek Agnihotri. And there were so many confabulations. There was so much mythography in that film. And according to its state account, 279 Kashmiri Brahmins had been killed during the armed resistance struggle for freedom, which started in 1989 until 2009. At this point, the number would have increased. There are Kashmiri Brahmins still in Kashmir, and their figures are in the range of 600s. But that particular sad affair, when they were misguided, used as pawns in this game of coloniality, is used very deliberately to put down Kashmiri Muslim resistance, just like what Palestine and Ghazans and how Israel is using anything that Hamas does to carry on its predetermined plan to commit genocide. The film Kashmir Files was even critiqued by the Israeli filmmaker called Nadav Lapid as a vulgar propaganda film, for which the Israeli ambassador in India apologized. He was made to apologize because there was such a storm of critique after Lapid issued his opinion. And by the way, these ambassadors, at least the Indian ambassador in Israel, these are plumb raw positions. These are intelligence agency positions. At the same time that Indira Gandhi, the woman prime minister of India, the daughter of Nehru, was being called his sister by Yasser Arafat. At the same year, she started the connections between RAW and the Israeli spy agency Mossad. So the Indian capacity to speak with a folk tongue is a major difference that is between India and Israel. Israel is committing a genocide, and it's announcing that it's committing a genocide. India commits genocides and it says, oh, we love Kashmiris, we love Kashmir. We are a multicultural, multi-faith mother of all democracies. And so that capacity to speak completely opposite things at the same time is crucial to its ability to squelch the speech of all Kashmiris, of all people who resist against Indian oppressions. Examples from the US include major funding from the Silicon Valley of the fascist Hindutva movement in India and the demolition of hundreds of mosques, starting with that of the iconic Babri Masjid in 1992. Another example is the California history textbook controversy. This is when certain changes were introduced in the history textbooks that are taught to the middle school students in Californian state. And because California is a large state, these textbooks actually were then used by many other states in the United States. And they had introduced some changes. They had more description about the caste system. And many fascist Brahminical groups were protesting against them and wanted no mention of caste, or wanted to defang the descriptions by saying, well, caste is just like class. And India was not, it's, civilization, the Brahminical civilization is not really misogynist. The women, even though they're not allowed to get married again in the olden times, they still got to inherit their gold jewelry. Or when they committed, they were made to commit suicide on the pyres of their dead husbands. They did it of their own wishes. Some of it is, these examples of squelching speech that Israeli model are happening in Kashmir and in the US right now. Another example is the controversy of the Saiba Verma case. The Saiba Verma, an anthropologist, allegedly teaching feminist methodologies, decolonial methodologies, while her own methodology amongst the most vulnerable Kashmiris you can imagine, the people who had suffered so much that they were going to the only public psychiatric hospital in the state of Kashmir. Those were her subjects. She was never transparent to them. She lied about her antecedents. Her father was a very highly placed officer in the Indian intelligence agency, RAW, but she never came out either to her subjects or to the psychiatrists, doctors, staff, nor to her anthropologists, journalists, activist friends in Kashmir, endangering everyone. And Saiba Verma, instead of apologizing, instead of giving back her PhD or her tenure, ironically complained of racial discrimination against other faculty members, one of whom is from the most oppressed caste and a Shia Muslim Pakistani. You could not get more caste oppressed, position oppressed than that. And that too is out of the Israeli textbook. Those who complain about oppression are themselves labeled as the problem. Our screams of pain are used against us. Those who have the backbone to stand next to truth speakers are labeled as anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic. Anti-Zionists we are, and it should be, and that should be the truth-speaking position, but the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism in exactly the same way, the conflation of anti-Brahminism with anti-Hindu or based on her race and caste. These are very scary tendencies. And these are battles that we have to fight together because justice is bound together. I argue that this accelerated and selective application of the Israeli model is a very vital aspect of this context of settler colonialism. It kills speech. People are scared to speak the truth. It kills the aspiration to self-determination. Though obviously we have brave, courageous, beautiful Palestinians, brave, beautiful Kashmiris, who because of their faith refuse to be silent. It wants to disappear us. And it also wants us to not talk about that disappearance. Each breath we take, each laughter we laugh, each tear we cry, each protest, each talk is our resistance. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hi, Huma. Thank you so much, Professor Dar, Huma, my friend, for such a beautiful talk and for really sort of bringing a lot of sort of the pieces together and just, you know, a note also, right, about sort of the kind of punishment and reprisals that people are going to get for standing up today. I think that, yeah, I sort of echo your like call that we all have the collective courage, right, to stand with and those who will be punished for their anti-Zionist stances here, and of course, you know, for those of us who have the courage to, you know, speak and act as loudly as we can right now, you know, kind of with Palestine and you know, also for Kashmir. And I want to also thank you so much for bringing and sharing all of this knowledge with us, because I know that, you know, in the context of the punishments that I and, you know, my colleagues received, a lot of it was because people just simply did not know and understand kind of what was at stake. And so, or kind of remained unknowing, right, deliberately. And so I really thank you for kind of continuing to be so generous with sharing your knowledge with us here. So the way that this is going to work is this panel was supposed to go until 5:30. And I think we can go for another 10 or 15 minutes, if that's okay, so that folks have a chance to ask questions. And I wanted to say, first of all, that if there are any folks who are Palestinian or Kashmiri who want to ask the first questions to Professor Dar, please do so in the chat. And so I'll wait a moment to see if anybody has any questions. Shall I give it a moment? Or I can actually kind of start. And Huma, you know, if I ask a question and it's like a terrible question, you can actually move on and answer, like talk about whatever you want. Unless, okay, Shaista, you have a question?
Wendy, you never ask her a bad question. And I love you.
Love you too. Shaista?
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to Professor Humadar. I know many of my students are here, and I know that on Thursday when we meet again, your talk will be the focus of so many of our conversations. I just want to say thank you so much once again. My question, and you know, my question is, how can Indians, how can dominant caste Indians show up for solidarity for Palestinians and Palestine? What are the ethical ways in which dominant caste Indians in diaspora in the US, for example, how can they show up for Palestine in ways that are ethical? And you've answered this, but I just, you know, for the students who are here, I would, if it's okay, I would like you to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important question, Shaista. And usually it's very easy and it's very convenient for Indian progressives or wannabe progressives to show compassion and empathy and solidarity with Palestinians without looking at their own backyard, without looking at their own ongoing genocidal occupations. And it is obscene if they do not even agree that the word occupation, Indian occupation, should be applied to Kashmir, and yet they want to be the leaders of pro-Palestinian solidarity because it looks cool. Those are politics of convenience. Their so-called solidarity will have very little effect. Their solidarity will make sense. It will be rooted on the ground and will carry a spiritual, political, strong message if they actually are against colonialism and the oppressions of caste wherever they exist, including where they have the most power. So people like Spivak or Partha Chatterjee or Vijay Prashad, they're conceding the colonial occupation of Kashmir, and they're standing up against all occupations starting from Kashmir, would be so much more powerful, have more meaning for Indian occupation, for India, the state, the colonizing agent, than when they say any pro-Palestinian thing. It doesn't ruffle Israeli feathers at all. Those who are insincere to their own positionalities, their own privileges and entitlements, how does one trust their solidarity? How can one trust their solidarity? So the suggestion is to be humble and to learn, because the first step, and Wendy, as you correctly pointed out, most people are actually not aware, and some of them are deliberately not aware. It's a cultivated ignorance, which is undergirded by kind of racism, that they don't need to learn about that colonization by brown people of other brown people. That any colonization of sense is actually really between white versus other people of color. And so learn, be humble, don't take up too much space, because we have Indian people sometimes who come into our resistance spaces and who take up so much space with their questions and their self-meditations and their self-flagellations or counter-arguments, or the desire that we should be pure victims in some ways, exactly as we are seeing the veils being lifted and everyone wants Palestinians to be the pure victims. Like, why did Hamas do that? No. It's the original violence is that of colonialism. Until that violence is lifted, has been repaired, it is obscene to ask for the victims to just take the violence and be pure and moral in every sense of the word. I think Mahmoud Darwish had this beautiful poem about a people that he said that we Palestinians are people because in a people, we can be good and beautiful and bad and ugly. You have an entire people. You'll have a whole range of moral standpoints and ethics, and to demand that this entire people that's oppressed under a genocidal boot of a colonial oppressor, we should act as angelic and let them kill us beautifully, is obscene. Does that make sense? So just absolutely stand with the Palestinians 2,000%, 2,000,000%. They are my heartbeat. But be sincere and earnest about your power, about your position, and speak against all colonialisms, especially where your voice matters. I feel I don't know. I mean,
No, that was perfect. So, okay, a couple of things. One, we have some requests to share out information, like more sort of readings and things about Kashmir. And I think we can do that for folks who who signed up for the webinar at a later time. So yes, definitely we can do that. Another thing is I'm seeing two people who have their hands up as like to ask a question or perhaps to express love or whatever. I would ask that you do that in the Q&A, just because we want to make sure that we're not going to get any weird trolling. I know it's not, but we want to just maintain a consistency here. So if you can put your comments in the Q&A, that would be great. And then a question that I wanted to pose. So from the Q&A, it's the last one. It says, "Thank you, Professor Dar, for the evocative talk. My question is about disappearances of Kashmiri women that you talked about, and how we might situate this within the political context of enforced disappearances of the Indian state." Part one. Part two, to add to this question, how might we read the figures of 10,000 women provided by the Indian state when they have vehemently denied the well-documented enforced disappearances in Kashmir? So that is a question for you.
Thank you so much, Ifsha Jigar, for that excellent question. The fact that at least 10,000 people, both men and women and all genders, have disappeared, and there is this amazing group, ABDP, Association of the Parents of the Disappeared People of Kashmir, that used to hold protests every month. And at this point, they're not able to do that under the current just absolute pressure of the colonizing state. And there is tons of data on and that's the lower limit of the number. And yes, the Indian state doesn't quite concede it, or they say, well, some of them were disappeared by Pakistan, or some of them joined the militants and they became so-called terrorists, so we're not really responsible for them. And that, of course, is obfuscating a colonial empire at its best. The figure of 10,000 that came about did come out in the Senate, in the Raj Sabha of Indian Parliament, the upper house of Indian Parliament. And it was not much reported. It was reported in one or two pieces, and that's it. There was no analysis of it. No Indian feminists wrote any article on it. And it was a very reluctant response that came from the state, because one of the senators had asked a question about that. And, it's not Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, it was never a state of India, even though it was called a state, but we are a disputed area. We are a people whose right to self-determination still needs to be resolved according to the United Nations resolution number 48. Yet, in that listing of the number of women who have disappeared, Delhi is the topmost. Delhi, the federal area, the capital of India, and Jammu and Kashmir, the Union Territory, or the so-called Union Territory, the annexed conquered area of India, is second. And as you know, we have a mostly rural population rather than an urban population, and overwhelmingly Muslim population. So it's not like these women are just disappearing casually or anything. And it wouldn't do anything much for them it doesn't do them any good to make up this figure. Just like it doesn't serve the Indian state, it doesn't serve the colonizing state anything when they announced in 2009 that the number of Kashmiri Brahmins who had been killed in Kashmir all the way from 1989 to 2009 was 219. It did not serve their purpose, because they would have wanted to conflate the figure, exactly as the Kashmir Files, the films did. So it doesn't really suit the state, and yet this had to come out. And this is just the recorded number, because as we know, many of these numbers will not get reported. If a Muslim woman or a girl gets disappeared, we might or might not, there'll be families that might not report it. So it does not really serve them any colonial ploy to say, oh, Muslim women are disappearing. It is a badge of shame to them. And that's why there's been no chief minister has said anything about it. No article has been written by Kavita Krishnan or any Indian feminist or Smriti Irani or anyone, right? Because it doesn't really suit their narrative. So we can't really think that this is being invented by them. And my fear, of course, which is goes directly back to the Dogra time and the sex traffic, and is because of the links that I draw between that Hindutva regime that was colonizing us with this Hindutva regime that is colonizing us. And I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Dar. I'll take over with the remaining Q&As as Wendy had to step out. Thank you again for your very insightful and very beautiful talk. Just bringing together like so many different like history, so many different concepts too. We had another question that I wanted to uplift as well. That reads, Dear Dr. Dar, thank you so much for this moving talk. My question is, if we consider ourselves as hostages to these rogue states, their armies and corporations, how do we see the role of and the intersection of Kashmiri and Palestinian resistance and their allies?
Manmeet Jigar, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, yeah. The question is, if we consider ourselves as hostages to these rogue states, their armies, and their corporations, how do we see the role of and the intersection of Kashmiri and Palestinian resistance and their allies?
I think there's just such a natural love and support for each other because we feel each other's pain. I know most of my Kashmiri siblings, our relatives, we're again facing immense bouts of PTSD because what Palestinian siblings are going through is what we have gone through at multiple times, and it's like a pain in the center of your body. So we stand. I mean, the first people who ever get arrested in the world anything happens in Palestine, it's almost always in Kashmir. The first person who got killed, even in, was it 2016 or 2018, was in Kashmir. That photograph that was used as in the title was 2020 by a Kashmiri artist who was forced to erase his artwork, which said, "We are all Palestinians," with a beautiful figure of a Palestinian woman in a keffiyeh, and he was arrested. It's a natural outpouring. It's a natural affiliation, and I think also the feeling of being under deeply Islamophobic attacks as well, that also ties us. We are, I think, the kind of punishments that we're given, the way the world turns away, like in Ukraine. Remember how the journalist was saying, "Oh, these are blonde-haired, blue-eyed kids, and they are suffering through this." But when it's a Palestinian child or a Kashmiri child, who says things like this? Who expresses that kind of human compassion for us, Manmeet, right? Or it's a Sikh sibling who was getting martyred, and that compassion is missing from the global media. And the global media, I mean, Euro-American white supremacist media. And so that also brings us together. It brings us together in compassion. One of the big things that this Hinduphobia industry, the Hindu nationalist industry that came up with the term Hinduphobia has against me is because I spoke at a Sikh rally in 2017. And that was the first time I gave a political speech ever. And a first time that I spoke in Punjabi. And they hated me more than they hated any Sikh speakers, because I was a symbol of us coming together, right? And they can't bear it. So there are natural affinities that we have to build upon, and we are so much stronger. And that's when our numbers will mean something. Otherwise, what are Sikhs in India? Less 2.5% population. What are Kashmiris? Less than 1% population. But when we come together with all the oppressed, with not just in India, but with Palestinians and everywhere in the world, with indigenous people right here, that's when our voices are amplified. That's when our messages actually get across. Right?
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you so much for just pointing out, just how threatening these solidarities can be, but also how powerful it can be because of why the state fears them and kind of devises all these different strategies to make sure that they aren't put into practice. And kind of in line with that, one just last question that was also asked, that in thinking about strategies for organizing, one of the folks asked that you mentioned that the prevalence of the Brahminical order in the US as well. So what are some of the ways that this order shows up specifically in respect to Kashmir here in the US? And further, like what can we do to both expose and dismantle the way that it shows up in the US in regards to Kashmir?
I can give you a very local example. Almost all my degrees are from UC Berkeley. Since 2019, the illegal, explicit annexation of Kashmir by India, they have held exactly one event on recent politics, and that was after a year and a half. And before that event, I just pointed out that there was not a single Kashmiri, Muslim on the speakers. There were two speakers. One was Mridu Rai, a person in solidarity with us, but a Brahmin from Bihar, and another one was a Bengali Brahmin. And I critiqued that on social media, and here is the annexation of Kashmir, and you can't find a Kashmiri person to speak about it. And apparently, some funders for the South Asian Studies or Institute of South Asian Studies actually wrote to the director, to the Institute for South Asian Studies, and they decided to postpone the event. And they asked me for the names of Kashmiri scholars, and why didn't they do their own work? why do I have to be asked about the names of other Kashmiri scholars? And obviously, I was not invited, but one of the names that I had suggested, that person was invited. And before the talk, he was told explicitly that you are here only because the people were kind of unnecessarily critiquing the institute. Whenever I go to talks at Berkeley and I speak on Kashmir or on caste, I'm cut short. Many times my hand, which shoots up like a comet immediately as the question and answer period is announced, I'm not called on, even if I'm lecturing on the campus that same day. So the censorship of Kashmiri voices in academia is explicit, it's intense, and it is obscene.
No, absolutely. No, thank you so much for that. And I'm just kind of sitting with even since earlier, like you brought up just these different cases of even, for example, like Cyber Burma, and kind of even in calling out these different like unethical like practices across academia, and the types of repression that like the institution like responds with in order to shut down conversations on whether it be Kashmir or whether it be on Palestine. So with that, like we that kind of concludes, especially and I know we are already way over time, like so, and also being respectful to your time as well. But wanted to once again from the UC Collective for Caste Abolition extend just so much gratitude to you for all the labor, for all the work that you've been doing, and in the context of also so much violence as well, like whether it be as you shared, like showing up in all these different ways to these different events, and despite like these constant disappointments, all the way that you keep showing up as well, like may we continue to keep fighting alongside and keep showing up as well, and may these different strategies to limit our solidarities or to fill us with fear, may these strategies like not ever work, and may we keep continuing to show up, and maybe we keep until both Kashmir and Palestine are free, and until all occupations do end. So with that, thank you so much again, Professor Dar, for all your time and for all your love. And thank you everybody also who took the time out as well to join the teach-in. I know there were a lot of questions that were asked as well, asking for resources. So for the folks who did register, we would follow up with an email sharing more resources for folks to be able to learn more, as well as the works that we did cite Professor Dar, for y'all to be able to access those as well. So look out for those in the upcoming days. And with that, I will, yes, Professor Dar, like any last comments?
Yeah. May I have a copy of all the questions, because I can't read and respond to questions at the same time. If I can also have a copy of the questions, I would be able to get back to them as well. And I want to end with a prayer. Nasru minallahi wa fathun qareeb. Victory lies in the Creator, in the Divine, and Fatah, the victory, is close by. Ameen summa ameen.
Thank you so much again, Professor Dar. And with that, may we continue moving towards victory. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night or good morning to folks who are joining from across the world as well. And Radhika, did you have your hand up as well?
Yes, in case folks have any questions that they would specifically like to be answered, especially Kashmiri and Palestinian folks, please put your email IDs in the Q&A as well. They're only visible to us, so we will try to get back to you as well, just because we are pressed for time too.
Thank you, guys. And I love the work you guys are doing on the UC Caste Abolition stuff. Amazing. I'm so proud, so inspired by you guys. Amazing.
All in community, and only being made possible because of the work, the ground that you are clearing out as well, with that you've been clearing out for so many years. So thank you for making way for us to be able to do this type of work.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, and good night. We will stay on the Zoom, but feel at least to allow for the questions that are incoming in. And then Professor Dar, once we can then email those over to you as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try to read some as well. There's a question about why my articles are disappearing from major online databases, because I'm shadow banned. There are like Maktoob online. It had published. It used to copy my Facebook posts and publish them as pieces. Sometimes not even tell me, and I had no problem with that. But they have had to remove most of my articles or most the posts that they had shared, and I'm shadow banned on Twitter, which means that even those who have that box tick mark that they should be informed of all my tweets, they don't hear about me. I can respond to somebody else's tweets and they won't be notified that I have responded to their tweets. So that is again an attempt to squelch our voices. What can I say? Keep looking for me. Maybe I don't know, get in touch with me and I can forward you whatever piece you were looking for. Absolutely. And the Panache Joyce mentions that the Brahminical imposition is not only about caste hierarchy, but also the brutal masculine dominance. 100%. Absolutely. It's very much gendered, sexualized, racialized, casted. And religion is a major aspect of it. How would you address gender injustice within the Muslim community all over the world, as well as within Brahminical society in India? So that part of the question I would put a hand up on. This is like asking about black on black violence at a moment of Black Lives Matter. Like any community, of course, we have the problems of patriarchy and toxic masculinity and homophobia, but these are not to be conflated at a moment of genocide from with Islamophobic intent. Does that make sense? So we can't gender wash or pink wash these concerns. We have entire. I'm 60 years old, guys. I have an entire lifetime that I've devoted to gender justice against homophobia, and we are living testaments to the fact that we are aware and we're fighting against those things. But to ask this question at this moment is inappropriate, and I hope you take that with the love that I'm offering this answer with. So there's a question by Arman Kazmi who says, I want to point out firstly, there's no proof that the disappearances, 10,000, were only about Muslim women. Secondly, there's no data available on the nature of these disappearances and the role of state in it. I have actually not stated state's role in this. I only pointed out the state's role in the earlier period of the Dogra regime when the women disappeared and were making their labor, sex labor and trafficked labor was making money for the Dogra regime. I have not said anything about how Indian state might or might not be behind these disappearances and what they're using. So the intent, but my intent really is to ask about those questions. For some, I'm not on the ground in Kashmir. They will not give me a visa. So it is for people there, for Savarna Indians who are in solidarity, if they are in solidarity with Kashmir, to do this investigative work. Let's see. So I don't see a point in the background you're giving and how you link it to the disappearance and make your conclusions based on the same. I am not sure what to say to that about it. Whatever the case might be, the disappearance of 10,000 women with a 300% increase from the last 3 years is worthy of investigation. So if this investigation takes place in an explicit, transparent way, I'll be more than happy.
Thank you so much, Professor Dar. And then there's also just so much love and appreciation as well, like coming in as well, as folks just found the connections that you were making and the solidarities that you were moving us towards as just so generative. So I will also continue kind of mining through these questions. And I know folks in the audience aren't able to see the questions. just for like security reasons as well. So we can we could kind of synthesize the questions and then send it via chat, and then in the email that we do follow up with, we could kind of have some of those resources like spelled out for folks.
Yeah. Are we ended, or there's one question, Hadia Manzoor? Maybe I missed this answer, but why is Kashmir so sought after by Brahminical caste? That's something that I worked on 16, 17 years ago. The whole construction of the pornotropic, the pornographic obscenity that is bestowed on the colonized land by the colonizers and on the people as well. And that was an entire project starting from 1947 onwards. There existed no such desire for Kashmir pre-1947. This is the Indian state in its independence that this pornotropic desire for Kashmir and Kashmiris was constructed, and Bollywood, Indian cinema, is an integral part of that colonial apparatus. So if you look at movies, Bobby, even Mission Kashmir, Kashmir Ki Kali, Jungli, that land as object of desire, land as seductive, or Roja, where the land is shown in the moment of sexual consummation of the two protagonists in their moment of first lovemaking. Kashmir is present there as an aphrodisiac. That's how that pornographic desire is constructed. And I do have a paper out. That's the first paper that Manmeet mentioned in my intro. Let's see. So there's a question by Rajiv Tiwari. I'm not Kashmiri, not Palestinian. So if there is time, how does one resolve the seeming paradox of India's recent announced aid for Gaza? Thanks. People think, many educated people think that India was long pro-Palestinian, it was anti-Israel. That is not really the case. Even at the start of the non-aligned movement, Nehru actually wanted to include Israel. It was not until Gamal Nasser said no. And they also wanted to woo the Arab states a little bit for the purpose of oil, because it was they needed oil for all the construction projects that were going on. And so there has always been this, the thing I mentioned about the folk-tongued, the ability of India to say one thing and another, quite opposite, actually often diametrically opposite, while following its own real political goals. And that is one of them. So the major thing is India is the biggest exporter of surveillance technology from Israel. India is the biggest exporter of weapons of war from Israel. And they call each other soulmates. So, and you saw that Bollywood song, or Bollywood-esque song by Rafael, the missile company, when it was wooing Indian state to buy its missiles. It was obscene and pornographic and colonial all at the same time. So India does and can do both things at the same time. There's no, there's no commitment to truth. There's no commitment to anti-colonialism. Somebody asked question, Usman Ahmed Khan, is there any word on rate and number of mainland Indians settling into Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir? Suggestions on how to try to stay updated on this? Well, the last year, so it's all at this point more than 12 months ago, at least 4 million Indians. I would not call them mainland Indians, because that means that we are somehow peripheral Indians. We're not Indians. Clear and simple. They are Indians, they're Kashmiris. So I wouldn't use mainland Indians with Indians. I hope that little point sticks, but I know that you say Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir was, and that number of people who were given the go-ahead signal to come and be settlers on the colonized land of Jammu and Kashmir was 4 million last year. And I do not have the numbers for this year. They have not been released. As you know, all of the people, all of our friends, relatives who have been doing the work, the research, are incarcerated right now. So I'm not sure where I would get that number from, but maybe sometimes in the parliament, somebody brave will ask a question on what is the number of the domiciles, that status that has been given to Indians, and we will have a number for you then. So it's like almost, if it was 13 million or if it's like 15 million as was projected, almost another 25% people of its population have suddenly been given permission to come and settle. And most of those people are retired soldiers who had killed Kashmiris during Indian occupation. So our killers, our murderers, our rapists are being given domicile status to come and settle in Kashmir. That tells you a lot about the perverse mentality of colonialism. Like, colonialism is a disease. It's a deep spiritual disease. I think it's a sickness, and it extracts pleasure from torturing the colonized. Suggestions on how to try to stay updated. Well, Stand with Kashmir is one source. Kashmiri scholars, K-Scan, if you can look up their website. We've written open letters, reports, statements to United Nations, to many different bodies, and we have many excellent resources. We have an FAQ describing the history, and even what about the Kashmiri Brahmin, etc., etc. I would highly recommend you look at that. Stand with Kashmir also has a web page where they have resources to be used in class syllabi for curricular purposes. So there are lots of resources there. I think we've gone through most of the questions, Manmeet.
Yeah, I think so too. No, thank you so much for just all your generosity with staying after and just getting through all the questions. And I'm sure folks also must really appreciate just all your time as well, and being able to stay beyond what we had given you. So thank you so much for your care and for your generosity.
Bless you. Vaheguru Ji da Khalsa.
Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji di Fateh.
Okay, take care, y'all. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much again, Professor Dar. We'll stay in touch via email.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Take care.